Okay, red light's on. Welcome everyone to the public meeting for the Navajo Nation proposed determination. We're very excited to be reaching this point. This is the kind of we're getting close to the end, and we filed the proposed determination with the court, and now we'd like to talk about what that means and what happens now. And I guess I should introduce myself. My name is Mike Drake. I am the Deputy State Engineer for the state of Utah.
Mike Drake, Utah Bancher in the state of Utah, but engineer, larger, that was that. Tony Robbins, that is the Washington, but in the shake, a touch, yeah.
So in this public meeting, this is our agenda. We're going to talk about why we're here, why we hold a public meeting. We'll very quickly review the adjudication process. So we're here to talk about a water right adjudication. And then we'll also talk about how you access the proposed determination and how you interface with it. And then we'll talk about what happens now, and then we'll take questions if there are any questions.
I said, unable this keep quiet. The doshi bahwin $10. I don't know she last she I don't know she hot or she get ego has honored the I don't know she not the kitty has honored that is so.
So the reason we're here is all comes down to this Winters versus United States court case in the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court. And it was a decision that came down in 1908. And what it said is that when the U.S. government sets aside land, specifically in this case for Indian reservations, they also dedicate sufficient water for the purposes of that reservation. And so that's what we're doing now. Is there was an agreement that was reached between the Navajo Nation and the state of Utah on what that water right, what that reserved water right would be. And there was a signing ceremony a couple of years ago where the Navajo Nation, the state of Utah, and the United States all signed an agreement as to what those water rights would be. And in summary, it identified 81,500 acre feet of water for the Navajo Nation. Among other things, it also established funding for water development projects within the Utah portion of the Navajo Nation. And so roughly $200 million, a little bit more than that, was dedicated by the federal government, and $8 million was contributed by the state of Utah. This is a very important part. This is an important part of Utah's water right adjudication. It plays into how the Colorado River is managed, and the state of Utah wants to complete this. So we're very excited that we're at this point right now, where the proposed determination has been published. But that's the background for why we're here. We're part of that adjudication process that is bringing that settlement into water law.
Winters doctrine, Winters versus United States, but the Nego, Asian Quackashing, so Washington, they got a deep sensitivity. Because hiking that is Aniki 80 ha shi be ina ba ka do next do a di be na shi ki to ba ha no do le ka shi ne lo na ko shi e ka be shi ka de a ko a de ne ko ji ka de ya di ka di Utah be ki Adjudication by the Huishito, Adjudication based at the Aniki, a question, na Kinakayata, May 27, 2022, with the know that she that based at the Ebinashiki, Tebetino outside Oslan, the Remediation, Bigakoshi, a Yati, Nabehut, the Nabakaya, Haki, Ajit, Sarahot Sunday, a Hashin, so Ajit, but you will indo the often on a lap, bars and trios, Iniki, she a ego base had it. Other Abenashes had it, Aniki, so Hashil Sogi, based on Liniki Beka, a yedo, but Nashiki Tobe that on the shore Tobe, great ego to that, Iniki has your bandas out that door, need a Kineda, the meal, are they Washington, the base of are they pushing? No, that all this. Ado, bananas. Oh, it's a bit say be the media. The bit say be the media. Hagi Utah they go. I stop crashing, but I'm not based on busing this all. But not she probably done this all. So ado can ego she that by the wind. One dust ado the door. But we take at the outdoors. Nick ado to a dick a dicky a yati a siki a Ntago di Utah bedet a quite Balkana Provinces, that is Ziniki Asian Quag in Nisho, Utah Yas Ziniki, I see Yegoshi, Bendas Nisho, Benashiki, I Yego, had it Agi, to a Quagishin, illegal, not any Gibenache. But Egon has your audition, this Shinkish in Shisha, they told it.
So this is the adjudication process that we have been running through since we started this adjudication about 2 years ago. I'm not going to review this in detail now just because we're very close to the end. But it started out with notices that were sent and summonses, and then there were different filings that were made with the court. And then over the last 2 years, we've been evaluating some of the claims made by both the federal government and by people that possess water rights, state-based water rights within the area. And then on May 22nd of this year, we filed the proposed determination. And we have a few copies in the room that people can look at if they'd like to at the end of our time here to see what we produced. This proposed determination has several state-based rights, but it also has the Navajo Nation reserved right. And we are proposing to the district court that has jurisdiction over this adjudication to adopt that as the right for the Navajo Nation. So very importantly here, after this filing of the proposed determination, there starts a 90-day clock to file an objection. And so if we didn't do something right, or you feel like we got something wrong, now would be the time to file an objection. And so that time period is August 20th, 2024 to file an objection if you wish to do so. As you can see, one of the final steps is to hold a public meeting, which we are doing today, and then we will hold another public meeting this afternoon in Monument Valley at the Welcome Center. And so this is where we are. This is the adjudication process, and you can see we're very, very close to being done.
A public meeting with the even that she quite get his shot in Nike, a she quite get these jabas out of a kid on the shade at Aniki, or quite hashing so a Nast Ginger, she has honored a quite able to eat agua, the eight or the but not she had a door. In such case, he shut it out, side or incident. She quite has honored it. There's August 20, 2024, but they're going to actually be told it. So, 하실 소 디 아예고 벤 아즈네 시기 하죠 게 하즈 아네기시 혼돈 안 소스 바선데 비 데시 인트라이트 에고 시데트 온 세네기 에 과게시 is should desh ito the nostalgico e crashing has annually to a honor so been as the nation could the since the niki e crashing but they not kid all explanation is your she they not ito she spare house and all this console.
So when we filed the proposed determination, we filed it with the district court in Utah. We also provided notice to the federal government, which in this case is acting in trust for the Navajo Nation. We also filed it with several water right owners listed with our records. There are a few state-based water rights within this area, whether they be a few that are on Navajo lands and then a few that are on lands within our exterior boundaries that are not Navajo lands. And then any claimants that filed with our adjudication, and then any attorneys, any counsel of record that have filed an appearance with the court. On the screen, you can see links to access the proposed determination. In addition, we prepared a hydrographic survey, and it's important to note the difference here. We prepare a hydrographic survey as part of our adjudications. It's very limited in scope to just the state-based water rights. The federal government is also, as part of the agreement, preparing a hydrographic survey map. And this is a much bigger scope, much more comprehensive map that is going to map all of the existing uses on Navajo lands within the entire reservation. And that is an ongoing effort that is going right now. And so that's different than the map that we prepared. Our map is focused on just the state-based rights that are within this area. And so again, links to acquire both of those. If you have any concerns, please reach out to us. There was an email address earlier on in the presentation, and that email address will also be shown in a couple slides. Please reach out to us if you have any concerns on how to access these two documents.
ROTDT CA the house AAD at be she bears ani nagi she a hashin so AD das ka or the yap na she Washington de she nayas zingo yas tigo quite trust with the niki a quite days a she but not she AD quite hot the heart that said she had ego she quite has zini Arosto AD be on a detour she died the Nindo hashin so to with a date eki but boys negi do trios iniki the question as aunt Aggie but not she a sobeda hausen racing at the budget the condition that has asked K say I is the quite top DJ Bowing iniki quite a year twice he died the Nini better date eki hausen according the asking Chicago has onward and when the A quite again it opened at 800 he quite but when Tiniki is it all I wrote the Nachiki AD hasn't solved the best case and Niki internet with the Niki are the big that Josh Bowsen on those a quite dance quite double cut and not in all the Kiki I don't that way is not so short not so short no to she then I think kid all this konde hashing so chino by legal she ta je to ni aro 80 Utah the world deputy Nini district court with ni she a is she not so be das so a quite she a be ya do she actually a quite she put egon ni his thousand dollars Arodi sto di aiego tona rei sto nas alia behasen odalia di kaya haki nas chan odalia even nas is a Josh behasen no seno sto di quite Based that case, internet the NB when I has actually not ego when has annually. Aro so she anal source. Eyes anal source behind that he thought quite that no sin she thought quite she thought a night of kid all they say. What app.
So real quickly, just a summary of what is in the proposed determination. We recognize 86 water rights are described in there. Of those 86, there are 11 state-based water rights, 5 of which are on Navajo lands, and so those are, per the agreement, considered to be part of the 81,500 acre-foot settlement between the Navajo Nation and the state of Utah. There were also 75 federal reserved water rights. There are 2 of them for the Hovenweek National Monument, 2 for Rainbow National Monument, 1 for the Navajo Nation, which is the big one, the important one. And then there's also 70 allotments covering the various allotments throughout the Navajo Nation. And again, those are also considered to be part of the 81,500 acre-foot settlement. There were 16 state-based water rights that were recommended to be forfeited. Generally, these are rights that were not in use, or perhaps they were covered by Navajo Nation, the Navajo Nation water right. And then there was 1 renumbered state-based water right. And so these forfeited state-based water rights are generally, a lot of them were rights that were on some of the non-Navajo lands so it didn't really affect any of the Navajo uses of water. And so that's what's been recognized in the proposed determination.
The topic had it, and she hasn't so the 17 or start cares on in a she a direction to the Yosh in the dog. Akea, I guess, that Elvis got out his soagi, hasn't so quite Kaya to the AD 17 or start the Shiniki Asian AD that was she. Attended in AD Utah dog hasn't so Kaya Togi Bay or Niki Shinka Patron Niki according to AD Slagoshin is that but they to Hale did never Kaya Bikaki a quite a 20,000 Niki Tohanoniki Asian crab Bay Bears and Olia Aro connection AD so Stadino Ashlago AD Washington they became Hagibidi Niki Hashin any quaggy so toy probande na kigo at the Hovenweek National Monument the Ajit na kigo which over the next sheet or the Aro of Rainbow National Monument the Niki sto a na kigo she thought all this Aro Dinsha aside the she in was a the not she to never Kaya Washington never Washington Aju Kishimicho was net all this Aro Benachi to detail the corn hit the net and Nani Lini a topic a Kaya a topic in a sedabity, Lini with a date a just a dean who has a diki Asian aso, but das can't or bells and Odaria. I don't thought the Saoshi Ashi Hashin so I thought Tochodan in the Equand the Gene the Dochoda, Ego Nashi in the old Tata, Asian or Hashin so the had on his but she does lean all the Strantat that over that. Aro of Doshin Sashay, I is a Sagoshay, Asian or South up the number Nandia, South out Nandia, she believed the Asian Dopadet in the Sydney. I could Egoshin, a that Sebetino Astra, has Aniki of that. It is Charles Yarolis.
So this is the front page of the proposed determination, and I wanted to point to a few things here that if you were to file an objection, you would need to know. This identifies the district court that has jurisdiction. It has the general adjudication description and the civil case number. If you were to file an objection, let's see, the civil case number is not in the box, unfortunately. It's just below the box. I point to this on another slide as well. But the civil case number is there. That's the 8107-04477 number. Again, if you have questions on that, reach out to us. Also, the name of this hydrologic division and the subdivision name, which is the Navajo Nation Subdivision. That's how it's identified at the district court. And then the area and book numbers. These are numbers that our office uses to organize the different adjudications throughout the state of Utah.
Diga na el kidigishe yati jota na studying this kaje jo e be atoliki khashin so e akwa egish bahosen no senigi ya so khit da dinna hot ani don ki at e kota na suspend this suspend shaba hunsen no senigi ya e dinna khati el kidigi bahosen no Jesus speaks so the district court in the Seventh Judicial District Court in Fort Grant County, state of Utah, Asian Quagget, Utah, Walte, he Quagget, a Quagget Bahwin, Bahasenego, Autobiyagan, AD, I thought not Sadiki, Christian case in the A Quaggia, Naki, AD, Bedadate, or Liki. No, that's it. Any beo jiggy quabi so. A been AD, I thought about the enemy are in Lenigi, a beado, Bahwin Inigi, so quabis so. Of course, not the the thousand dollars, a yadi civil number, but the court case, but the Niki a beado, I can say beado aside or Nasmas dots, Nasmas ding or. Så det er ikke sin jobb i dag slipper når ikke at jo bare ejer sig bare så dårligt. Då det kan bare hente ind i det bedre det aniki AD aniki AD San Juan River Division det er også Navajo Nation Subdivision det aniki jo to na grej og to der aniki kvage men altså et af hos aniki sin A så vi så dog slipper er også det sin A så det er altså så jo altså sin det Utah bedi nene bi rationel la og de tropa der hun eniki at stå sig ved $1,000 lige de kinek ayad he give a car area number 09 the car out on the book 1 lige situation de qua ved $1,000 ikke qua sin stop jo bi så der dog sig jo de på de jo ben rationel sig de ret ego der har anegi der ikke at ego der de der which ret ego han endte slik når sådan noget men altså illegal shot not et eller sådan noget på en ras anegi et de men altså ikke bare sådan noget der dog slik men altså jo donan alwashin ha next index jo så dårligt.
Okay, the next page is what we call the notice to water users, and this gives instructions on how to file an objection if you wish to do that. So here we've correctly identified the civil case number, and so that's listed there. And then this paragraph here describes how to file an objection. If you were to file an objection, the objection needs to be filed with the 7th District Court in the state of Utah. And so again, if you have questions on where and how to do that, we can answer those questions for you. But we can't receive the objection. The objection needs to be filed with the court.
Also die Nana Kidigi die Hajoyen is heit ego die na anegi is ago do heit elder shabe $1,000 no sinigi had do sleep for the nana to HP has anal so sigi a civil case number with the any bit nanas so bin nach $1,000 diki aro on the 80 aquati Hashin so 80 tortureos any bit kan the NYI bin nach shin a with $1,000 sto a bin nach iki sto dinal so hat do sleep do is don is strong ya logo edo don hit out the don ya eota so $8 so 80 diki a ya bin nach iki hot egos ke has asada se ja do sleep a that the I is Walte with the Niniki 7th District Court with the Nini Ade Shinal Swas, which you hot off seat ADK Ade Shimpi Nhat Pigedes in all the store, Shin Hat Kate on the store, Aro Shin Benashi, the Hashing Swas and Haba in all this.
Okay, so maybe the biggest question is what happens now? I talked about this a little bit already, but we are in the middle of an objection period on this proposed determination. And so if you were to file an objection, that would have to be done by August 20th, 2024. We are in the process of transferring the second 1/3 of Utah's $8 million. We'd like to do that before the end of this month. And once we get through the objection period, and assuming there's no or very few objections, the next step will be to get an interlocutory decree on this adjudication. And at that point, Utah will transfer the final installment of the $8 million. Also ongoing, I've talked about this a little bit, but the federal government is doing this hydrographic survey where they're cataloging all historical and existing water uses throughout the Navajo Nation. This was something that was required as part of the settlement agreement. That's ongoing. They've worked in the Aneth area. They've worked in the Mexican water area. They've worked in Red Mesa. I think they've recently completed Red Mesa area. And they're now working on Navajo Mountain and then westward from there into what they call the Lake Powell area. And so that's ongoing, and we're not quite sure exactly how much longer that will take, but it's a big job to map all of that area. And so that will continue to go on. And so that's what's happening now.
Objection period. Donc il y a école qui n'a pas aniki do et aniki ago sa do intlo sniki 80 kad na kendes August bi gona na dio kaso e konna shi adin habe atoli abchi do shi khashin so inal so ski hada do shi do e be $1,000 aro di so ha Utah de go sto but how so given that she based on that aniki se be the meat scha deniki egg adashi so that's what kan ya do yeshi eshi ya but not she egi be landa is ne oshi the navike ya ibe jo ne to the nachi hashi that ko ben that on the shigi back ben yet on the shigi aro sto edi had aniki sto be one as so edi Washington de go sto edi tona rei a tsoi north in the kachin the ni kwa Aneth yagi shin had the ai na ska do ton da go ki do tona rei shin so $1,000 ya aro so Mexican water ju the shin so na ska aro kachin ni shin kada shin da ai so Red Mesa ju e so kana so da le aro shin le na ha which is you go with how that's on Navajo Mountain, the Nini Aju, she told this. I don't know the Lake Powell Torsi, Yiniki, Aji, so she been she go home, a so she kaya, Torginat cat all this door. To be $8,000 at Hobbit, Tonda Bekaki, that was Nico be $8,000. Is she ice Yana this go there? But out as neck, which when she the Washington, is she had elected, but that she. The Kaya, Tona Reba, Hayano, that's been Yagi, has all been $1,000 that was Nick 80 bit base had it, and it be so totally.
So that final point, yes, sir, do you have a question?
When you asked about the hydrological survey, is it going to be available when it's all done, or is it available by the respective regions, the chapters, as they're done? And does it include all categories of water uses? I'm assuming it includes like surface uses of stock ponds, windmills, springs, but I don't know if it includes things like wildlife, fish, other categories, so to speak, of water uses as well. That's kind of what the question is.
Yeah. So the question.
Repeat the question.
Oh, yeah. The question was, whether the federal hydrographic survey map would be available in parts or as a whole, and how broadly the water uses are that they're categorizing, or that they're including in their map. I think it, and I guess I'm going to turn to our federal partners. I think it's going to be provided when it's complete, when it's one entire comprehensive mapping product that can be provided out to the public, is what I'm guessing. And I think the few federal representatives we have here probably don't know, because this is being managed by the Bureau of Reclamation. And Dustin Woodbury is the gentleman that's overseeing this, and he texted me, or he sent me an email last night saying he would be unable to come because his wife is 8 months pregnant, and they're dealing with some of those issues. And so I think that's a great thing to email us about, and I'll make sure that we get a good answer for you. Again, that's being overseen by the federal government, not the state. And as far as the uses that they're cataloging, as far as I understand, it's things like domestic uses, irrigation, stock watering, and they're doing both surface and subsurface points of diversion, places where people are taking water out of the ground. I don't know that they're getting so deep as what you've suggested into like some of the environmental type uses. Although one of the big points of this settlement agreement is that the state of Utah, the United States, and the Navajo Nation have agreed to an amount of depletion, and at that point, the Navajo Nation takes over as a sovereign and manages the water as they see fit. And so they certainly could include those types of uses in their water management structure. So at some point, these questions become questions for the Navajo Nation. It's not the state of Utah. Does that help?
Yes. I guess the question would be, it's hard to file an objection. Some of the chapters have kind of maybe done their own kind of watershed planning or plans and what's existing, and not having access to the final product to see if it matches up. I guess the concern.
Yeah. And I see the concern. The state of Utah necessarily has kind of narrowed their focus to just identifying the reserved right that we agreed to, 2 years ago when that agreement was signed. I think your point is that there's a lot more work to be done, right? There's a lot more work, and we don't have all of that information here. I think the question would be for now is the agreement as it's laid out, and it's completely, we've incorporated the agreement in its entirety in this proposed determination. And so is that agreement and the recommendation, does that conform with what the Navajo Nation sought to establish 2 years ago when they signed that? And if that's the case, then it seems like we would move forward, and then those are ongoing management issues that are going to have to be tackled, certainly, yeah. Yes, sir.
Yes, Mike, I do have a question on what you have covered on the whole wheat area having two rights to water. See, I live about 10 miles west of there, so how do I have access to this? Like if I want to start farming, hayfield, so who do I go to talk to them?
Is it on Navajo lands?
It is, yes.
Okay. Then you'd need to interface with the Navajo Nation Water Resources Department to do that. Those are not things that the state of Utah, that's kind of the point of the agreement, is that the state of Utah kind of steps back, and now the Navajo Nation manages water on their lands.
Then the other question I have is that 81,500 acres of water.
Acre feet.
Is that a yearly thing or is just a one-time thing?
Great question. I'm not repeating the questions very well. So the question was whether the 81,500 acre feet is a one-time or whether it's an annual recurring. It's an annual recurring thing. So each year, the Navajo Nation within the greater Colorado River Basin has the right to deplete up to 81,500 acre feet of water. And that's a huge amount of water. In Utah, sorry, yes. For the lands just in Utah. So this is just for Utah. Yeah, thank you for that, Sarah. That's a very important point. And this is very important given some of the events recently, and that the Navajo Nation has a tentative agreement with Arizona, and that water is for the Arizona portion of the Navajo Nation.
So what we're talking about here is for Utah only, not
For Utah
Arizona,
only.
New Mexico.
That is correct. Yep. And I'm sorry, I'm not turning much time over to you to answer these questions. Do you feel like there's anything we should interpret there? So there was a question about the hydrographic survey. Yeah, well,
Yeah, okay.
go ahead, sorry.
Washington hydrographic survey aro sto di sa hashin so ni na losta totrios enigi sto do aro sto be na ni shi enel indo de ha de be da house no ta ya do de so kwa hydrographic survey bi shi bi das so do de aro na de ki shi ya di shi ha shi ni ki ba house no de ha shi di de nani enigi do so ka be da de ki ha shi ni ki ho ne do de no na de ki oder das Kind has oder an da inishko als da ingo da dinge cho was ingo da way ya als so han na shi so da ya oder da da so ni cho dort nicht ja nein de Kind aro hat ja nazi dort die nein de Kind die hat ja nazi die als so al ja und da in ke ja ginas katoคนเนี่ยไปหาสิ่งอื่นอย่างนั้นสิ่งนั้นชอบไปแต่เองอ่านนั่นที่จะหัวดอนี่แหละตัวเองก็เราสิ่งที่ไปหาสิ่งนั้นแค่อยากให้กินตัวกินสิ่งทั่วหน้าเลยขนาดนั้นตัวเด็กสิ่งที่เป็นแบบที่เป็นบอกว่านี่ตัวเด็กตัวเองก็ให้เองก็เป็นได้ให้อาช่องอินตัวเด็กสิ่งเราที่ได้ยูทาเด็กได้ลาไปได้ปีเยอะขนาดวิศวะได้สิ่งก็ช่องอินตัวเด็กตัวactually wants to know this.
So the final point here, I wanted to talk about some of what is happening. One of the most meaningful parts of the settlement agreement was the funding for water development projects. And I do this with a lot of respect because this is not the state of Utah's role. This is something that the Navajo Nation is pursuing. And so it's a planning effort that they are undertaking and that the state of Utah is participating and supporting as needed. And so there's two things I wanted to talk about. Just they're things that we've been involved in a little bit, in just a small degree. So one project that's being pursued right now is what's called the Sweetwater Pipeline. And it is proposed to bring water from Shiprock in New Mexico in a pipeline through Arizona and up into Utah to bring 2,000 acre feet of water. So some of this 81,500 acre feet of water would be brought in from New Mexico where the water is cleaner and doesn't need as much treatment, and pipe that water into Utah, into the Red Mesa community, and into Tignes Pass. I don't know if I said that right. I apologize if I mispronounced that. And up into Aneth and Montezuma Creek areas. And so that's a project that is pending U.S. congressional approval, and we've had some meetings about this to coordinate it between the various states. As you can imagine, a project that runs through 3 states has some coordination that needs to happen. If you want to know more, again, this is an issue that the Navajo Nation is pursuing as the sovereign in this area, Feel free to reach out to Navajo Nation Department of Water Resources and they can inform you on what's happening on that project. Let's see, sorry.
Annotation is the hashing so the as got this anaki so be done is legal hashing so the tobin that on the shikishi so kakishi the number Washington they go to shi yokedia the Sweetwater pipeline yashi and the shipwreck they go as other toha lost all this to the Arizona when it lost a lot of condition Utah be equal she she the Utah be equal the never the BK hagi equal cut as number as a low but how is so she upon L beyond that in all this to Asian Utah be equal the red mesa I don't it's not sponsored I don't Aneth she so I could only I don't know Montezuma Creek Asian 20 at Aggie she added it lost all this the I've been not sure dog hashing so a bit had it and she a base of a okay the top part there she it lost all this the now there's not the this is good the torgy be old she when they land 200 acre feet you see a conne launching at the top when you called all of this naha bigache.
One other project, sorry, yes, a question.
So that 2,000 acre feet, I notice you have some red and some green. Is part of the pipelines built and are they getting additional funding through that Sweetwater amendment? For which portions need to be constructed?
Great question. So the question was asking in more detail what, because there's this existing pipeline there, and what would need to be built, and that's a very good question. From what I understand, and again I don't know the details on this, the pipeline needs to be upsized to carry this additional water. Perhaps it's a parallel water line that will be installed, and then there are some additional water lines that would need to be constructed to connect the Utah communities, the Navajo communities in Utah to the Sweetwater pipeline. Again, exactly how this is to be done is something that's being overseen by the consultants and those that are working for the Navajo Nation to design and manage this project. And so I don't know a lot of the details, but it's one thing that they're working on, and they're running some congressional approval to connect it with another project that's being pursued to, I think it's the Gallup or Navajo Gallup project, I think is what it is.
Public Law 11.
Public Law 111 is what it is. So again, I bring this up just to show that things are happening. Water is now, we're getting, the Navajo Nation is getting closer to bringing water to people in these different communities that have been lacking for so long. One other project, sorry, go ahead. Answer it.
I don't think I think keep in that she hasn't so as your zero to the house no illa a dequa to it's here to I hasn't so I to banda sego that con the 80 to Israel Nashagi saw that's a cheeky she ani another next when that on the shigi a condit at I she to banda send the side although I said dance has the she like hobby little she got the big at the she so AB when I had the net on the so she a condit that on the top of that I guess she the Washington niki she pass na quite on the she lake she so you can done the shigi she had the late on the quite and she get to the cake Utah be you the kid had in the toy at Agishiba Barlon is a short but one. One
other project that is just in planning stages right now is the potential of building a water line from Mexican Hat down to the Oljeto region. And so there are a few different alignments have been looked at. Again, this is just in the planning stage. Right now, the Navajo Nation is undergoing a planning study throughout the entire Navajo Nation to prioritize and determine what projects need to be built first. And this is one of those that we know about. Again, if you want to know more, it would be a good thing to contact the Navajo Nation Department of Water Resources. They're overseeing the planning and design of these projects. But I wanted to point to a few things just to show that things are happening. Planning and design is happening. Congressional approval is happening, but these are projects that are being considered with the funding that is available under this agreement and funding that's available through other sources as well.
Adjudication to hashing so the toba do set neniki from where were we going?
Mexican Hat.
Mexican Hat hol to Oljeto she to had lost all the to a quite part of say she the topic and neniki she to the a quite to a she to the hashing so the bound the peso this peso hashing so she got a quite been that on the sugar the arts for Kaya I did never Kaya which we was in it at she the hard normal she the Washington the number Washington because she in hard it says to a she had a base of the north the Hagi she Washington but based on that she production the kid has arbeit lana is sneaky she had opened the house and that
So that's the end of our presentation. On the screen, you'll see contact information for myself and also Chase McDonald, who is behind the camera for those in the room. You can reach out to either one of us. We also have a general phone number you can contact if you have questions about the adjudication. Lots of contact information here, and we're happy to discuss any question that you might have. And so with that, are there any additional questions we could take? Yes.
I was going to ask a funding question. You indicated that the final allotment of the $8 million from the state would be transferred. Is that going to the Navajo Nation Department of Water Resources, or is that to a different entity?
Yeah. So the question was about Utah's contribution, financial contribution, whether that would go to the Navajo Nation or whether that would be to some other entity. So the settlement agreement lays out that we convey it to the federal government to hold in trust for these projects in Utah. And so the first 1/3 of $8 million has been transferred. It was transferred 2 years ago. 2 years ago. And we're about ready to do the second 1/3, and then the final 1/3 would be done at the when the decree is reached. And so it's held in trust for the Navajo Nation.
Follow-up. I know that there's essentially a federal allocation. I don't know. Overall settlement, I think it's $230 million.
Yeah.
I didn't know if $8 million of that is coming from the state or if that's an additional. So I'm assuming the Bureau of Reclamation is the one holding for possible projects then, that's what you're saying?
Yeah, that's all right. So the question was about the $200+ million that the federal government put in. And so and where that's held and that's a great question. So the Utah's $8 million is separate from that, and it is solely Utah's contribution to that. The $200+ million, and the reason the number varies a little bit is because it's inflation adjusted, whereas Utah's was just a set $8 million. It's been allocated by the state of Utah. It's sitting in an account that the state engineer has that we're pushing it out when we hit these milestones. The federal money continues to grow with inflation and interest. And so it's the same thing. It's being held for when I guess I don't know exactly what type of account it is, but it's being held for these projects when needed. And the Navajo Nation taps into it when they're ready for the funding for these projects. Maybe I'll turn that over to you now.
Adjudication nanas kidiki ya so ego shin ajo na this kid no na the kitchen here ho no go edo the way ajo di by in ajo elda just jo dot arsenal scenario ad biche aperture da state all the go on da be keep base behind that or internet email but the keep so what up 8,000 also the division of water rights with the Ninigi Adu Utah Day was out so AD social housing so a package she be dosi so it'll double dosi a she be night of kilo package. Also be careful that she night take the yeah the based on that this Anigi Chohada ya and need being his shot I'd say be the meetings high the Utah Day or she late all this added no dagish that Washington who late all this to a late ego she halate out which was late all the Hania a she not based on a Utah Day no dagish a Washington Niki Chohala Washington Yanda she Washington Niki the essentially the never did Niki had so it days in okay yato there's a trust with responsibility and trust and even not a base of a coordinator called a that is in the store base of K but that ya shape the never Washington which you put on in all this a hashing so a based on not yaki she a should in all this a could ego she a based on that date all this so could issue all this.
Okay, yes, more
Yeah,
questions?
on the funding, distributing back to the Navajo Nation, I'm looking at an issue that it's going to be a problem. What if the distribution is made to our own Utah State Trust Fund? Right now, that's about the most protected funding there. Where us Navajos in Utah, you said that this is for the state of Utah. That way the Utah people will have access properly to the funding, I would say, instead of going to the Navajo Nation.
Well, it isn't the Navajo Nation. It's being held in trust by the federal government for the Navajo Nation. The federal government will adhere to the settlement agreement, which requires that these funds be used for Navajo members in Utah, for members of the Navajo Nation in the state of Utah. So I feel like there's adequate protection for that. This was described in detail in the agreement, and I'm happy we can look at the agreement. The agreement's part of the proposed determination. It's now, as far as we're concerned, part of Utah water law. It has to be obeyed in the state of Utah. And so I think it's pretty solid.
Aroti na de kidiki akede na de kidiki shenti beso da no dagi te be the meeting sagi niki na de kid Asian eyes at the never Washington but you was nate all it quite oil is ajanila a halabini na ge di sat is the based on that aniki the net Utah you got cat iniki Asian quite baby car and you know quite trios in the patrol in the lady to a quite do arts at the based on the based on that the better housing she be at the Belinda Akonde is the Utah Trust Funds
Utah Navajo Trust Fund.
Utah Navajo Trust Fund the in habit of be your whole yard she not yard 8 or no they kid Akonde could not how ziki a to I so has done the never Washington but you was named a Washington again that I is a Washington again based on you was named other on the dashi hashing so the never K I get your in the Aro sto di de hashing so as that aniki Asian pay has anin jo to hot ego chong ego she be has ani then ki kat hit all this so hashin so shin so pini nagi da sa da ho no this e hot shin that I is not ha or zero this.
I guess one final thought on your question is, certainly if you had concerns, you're welcome and free to file an objection in this. And I think that would be fine. That is part of the adjudication process, is file an objection if you have a concern. And then that concern will be vetted through the adjudication process.
Even if I do that, you know, if I decide to do that, would that stop the whole project?
It would slow things down, yeah. But we also, there would be a vested interest in both the state of Utah and the federal government and the Navajo Nation to settle that concern in some form or another.
Okay.
But it would slow things down, but that it's a right of people to file an objection in this. So I don't want to convey the idea that you can't. You certainly can.
Allocated nana di naide kidigi nana ya di do shiki at eko ko it's a bit the milliaji ki peso no dagi digi do I is the Washington which was negi do the Washington tree was in do the higi shiki at eko ko joy at the now Utah Navajo Trust Funds be taught so you know I take the large ki shin bin ki na the ki a ko AD bin ki shi a job hard di ani to ko ya e ko shin AD it's about so that the go ben about by the king actually care ko shin and so so Asian a di that point elder she I give but not so ben so the data so attend we do this so that is another national hall shiki not ha jo ziki Asian AD daga shin a condition o yan we do this to a do I is o ido klata shin a conde Asian ba kodi Utah do Navajo Nation do Washington Navajo Nation Asian I is do Washington ki so she has so ye net in do then so she has not ki hachin do nicht do aro het aber minst do het ego she that at another yagi da she that she nicht one do nicht op that she the house do nicht.
Well, why don't we wrap up the public portion of this meeting and the recording? So we appreciate those that are going to be watching this later on. We'll make the recording of this available on YouTube, and we'll send out links to the Navajo Nation, to the BIA, and make sure that these links go broadly to each of the chapter houses as well. Again, so we'll post that on YouTube. And so we appreciate those that are taking an interest in this, and please reach out to us if you have any questions. And I thank everyone for coming.
Ado shin ka di aside deniki shin ka scopic so ya no le to ado to di ka nas kidiki to a di kwa hajul negi do ado shido ko hashin so nat the ka ko hanegi be nat na hanegi atra hanegi shlage shi e di na di na kha danos in on the YouTube the NAB the based in that case the internet the NAB when actually so she nation class and she in habe hot in all this other she the Washington BIA the NAB Bureau of Affairs the NAB do auto Navajo Nation do out the state of Utah other she other quite she English shot the la wiki are in ha ego machine by the hunt on high sendoli.